Hi everyone, this presentation is going to be about missing and murdered Indigenous women. It is by myself, Jessica, and also Ashley, Ava, and Iris, and we are from Southeast Missouri State University. So my name is Jessica. I am currently a junior here at SEMO. My major is criminal justice. I am double minoring in criminology and social work. A fun fact about me is that I already work as a dispatcher. I'm a student dispatcher at our Department of Public Safety on campus. And then why did I choose to go the criminal justice and social work route? It's because I grew up in a military family surrounded by people who just wanted to help others and were very passionate about that, and that value was truly instilled in me. And then the picture that you guys can see of me, that was whenever I went to Niagara Falls with my family this past summer, and we were on the Maid of the Mist boat tour.
Hey, I'm Ashley, and I'm super stoked to be here with you. Before we jump into our research, I think it's awesome that we get a moment to kind of introduce ourselves and share a little bit about ourselves. I am what you would call a non-traditional student. I didn't jump straight from high school into college. There were some things that were going on, some decisions that I made, and found myself in active addiction for a long time. I am a recovering addict and alcoholic. I am really proud to say that I am in serious recovery and have now been clean for almost 6 years. Um, Something about that is I truly believe that my experiences have shaped me into a passionate advocate for social justice, just all around. Uh, it's an important belief of mine that everyone deserves equal opportunities, a chance to thrive, regardless of their background, histories, circumstances, or stigmas attached to them. And I have found myself just truly committed to fighting for a more inclusive and equitable society. And I'm so grateful to be a part of a project that aligns with those values.
Hi, my name is Ava. I am currently majoring in social work at SEMO. My goal is to be a licensed clinical social worker. I chose this path because I want to be a clinical counselor and help people who struggle with mental illness. I specifically want to help children and teenagers. A fun fact about me is I enjoy to travel outside of the U.S.
Hello, I am Eris Summers, a sophomore who majors in social work and minors in childhood trauma and outcomes. I have a cat named Salt, and I chose the social work route because I want to help people. I want to help those who didn't get the help they needed because I want everyone to know that they're not alone, that there's always going to be at least someone out there that cares. The issue of injustice of the missing and endangered Indigenous woman is caused by the colonization and historical trauma, racism, and sexual objectification of Indigenous women and girls. The purpose of this presentation is to raise awareness about this issue and discuss the underlying causes and potential solutions. Now, you could be asking, why is this an issue? Well, because Indigenous women make up a very large portion of missing cases. The range of victims is vast, some of the oldest being 83 and some of the youngest being less than a year old. I think the youngest that I saw documented was about 5 or 6 months old. Numerous families have to grieve the loss of their mothers, daughters, sisters, and grandmothers, and this issue is being ignored and has gone unrepresented to many government officials and people. And children and women, and honestly, no person should fear the potential sexual and physical violence against them just because of who they are. There are many instances in history that showcase the oppression and violence among Indigenous women, but here are a few historical events that I will bring to light. Forced sterilization of Indigenous women, violence, which became a huge element of power and strategy during colonization, and about 90% of the sexual/physical abuse of Indigenous women is committed by non-native perpetrators, which goes back a very long time.
There are lots of current issues with this topic. These are three of the main ones. So first off, we have investigative resources. which basically means that these cases go very untouched just because we do not have enough investigators and we don't have enough resources within their communities to be able to hold these investigations whenever these women do go missing or they are found murdered. And then also a huge thing in these cases is media coverage. I'm sure as most of us know, we always see on the news or we see on Facebook or Instagram about different women who wind up going missing or they are found murdered. And you see that all over, but most of the time you don't see these Indigenous women on any of those news sources. So one of the big problems with this is that whenever these cases happen, they really need to be more reported. And then lastly is human trafficking. So the Government Accountability Office's survey reports that 6 of 61 major law enforcement departments held human trafficking investigations that had at least one Native Indigenous female victim. So to help you guys understand what these women go through a little bit better, I'm going to give you some statistics. So 48% of them have been stalked at some point in their lifetime. They are 2 times more likely to be raped than a white woman. 56.1% of them have experienced sexual violence at some point. Their murder rates are 10 times higher than all other ethnicities. Murder is the 3rd leading cause of death with these women. They are 1.7 times more likely to experience violence. 55.5% of them have been physically abused by an intimate partner, which could be a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. And 84.3% of them have experienced some sort of violence. And then if you look at the picture below, it also adds that more than 4 in 5, the number of American Indian and Alaskan Native women who have experienced violence in their lifetime.
While there are policies aimed at addressing the missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic, there are also policies that have contributed to the problem or have deeply hindered efforts to address it. Racial bias, law enforcement response, and lack of jurisdiction. Historically, Indigenous communities have faced challenges in accessing justice due to limited jurisdiction over crimes committed on tribal lands. This has allowed non-native offenders to get away with perpetuating violence against Indigenous women, and the lack of jurisdiction has been a significant barrier to addressing this crisis. That ties directly into inadequate funding and data collection. The lack of complete and comprehensive and accurate data on missing and murdered Indigenous women has hindered efforts to understand the scope of the problem and develop effective policies. Inadequate data collection has made it difficult to identify trends, allocate resources, and develop any kind of targeted interventions. And one thing that goes really underobserved is the root of colonial policies and historical trauma. The MMIW crisis is deeply rooted in historical trauma and the ongoing impacts of colonial policies that have been rooted in the marginalization and oppression of Indigenous communities. These policies have only contributed to the social and economic disparities that make Indigenous women more vulnerable to violence. Addressing this crisis requires not only implementing policies that support Indigenous communities, but also deconstructing and dismantling policies that perpetuate harm done. It's crucial to address these harmful policies and work towards systemic change that prioritizes the safety and well-being of Indigenous women and girls. So, the missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic is a significant issue that has obviously disproportionately affected Indigenous communities. On a brighter note, several policies have been implemented in order to address the crisis and attempt to provide justice for victims and their families. The Violence Against Women Act was first enacted in 94 and has been reauthorized several times. It has helped provide funding for programs and initiatives aimed at preventing violence against women. And the reauthorization in 2013 included provisions specifically addressing Indigenous women pertaining to the MMIW crisis, such as increased tribal jurisdiction over non-Native offenders and improved data collection. In the United States, the TLOA, or the Tribal Law and Order Act, was enacted in 2010 to enhance tribal authority and resources to combat crime in these communities. It expanded tribal jurisdiction over non-Native offenders, allowing tribes to prosecute certain crimes committed on tribal lands, including violence against women. And both the United States and Canada have allocated additional funding to support initiatives addressing the crisis. This includes funding for victim services, community-based programs, mental health services, law enforcement training, and improved research. And governments have recognized the importance of working closely with the Indigenous communities to develop and implement effective policies. This includes engaging Indigenous leaders, organizations, and community members in policy discussions, decision making, and the development of culturally appropriate solutions. Now, while these policies represent important steps towards addressing the epidemic, there's still a lot of work to be done. Continued efforts are needed to ensure the implementation and effectiveness of these policies, as well as the development of new strategies to prevent violence, support survivors, and bring justice to the victims and their families. Social work and advocacy plays a crucial role in ending this epidemic. There are so many ways we can engage in various efforts to raise awareness, promote policy changes, and support our neighboring Indigenous communities. Social workers can and should educate the public about the MMIW crisis by maybe organizing community events, workshops, awareness campaigns, all in an attempt to advocate for policy changes at the local, state, and national levels. This includes supporting legislation that addresses this particular crisis, such as funding and enhanced training. We can also engage in what we've called grassroots advocacy efforts, such as writing letters, making phone calls, and meeting with our local policymakers to voice the concerns and push for change. We need to work closely with Indigenous communities to understand their needs, priorities, and perspectives. Collaboration with Indigenous leaders, organizations, and community members is essential in developing what we might call culturally appropriate solutions and solutions that reflect the unique experiences, challenges, and values held and faced by Indigenous women. Supporting survivors and families includes connecting them to resources such as counseling, legal assistance, support groups. It's a goal to ensure that they and we all have access to justice and support throughout the entire process. It is paramount that we continuously educate ourselves about the histories, cultures, and experience of Indigenous communities. We are called to be culturally competent and sensitive in advocacy efforts, ensuring that we approach the issue with respect, humility, and a true willingness to learn from Indigenous voices. By raising awareness, promoting policy, supporting survivors and families, and a true heart for collaboration, we can contribute to creating a safer and more just society for Indigenous women and girls.
How can a social worker help? Social workers can help by advocating for missing and murdered Indigenous women. Educating and informing others about the issue can spread awareness and encourage them to help. A way to do this is to get involved in organizations that speak to the public. Call for change. Advocating for laws and starting or signing petitions for laws such as the Savannahs Act can help the Indigenous community. The Savannahs Act was signed into law in 2020, which is to improve the federal response to missing or murdered Indigenous people by increasing coordination among federal, state, tribal, and local law enforcement agencies. Advocating for laws like the Savannahs Act can help missing and murdered Indigenous women. Social workers can also help by supporting Indigenous women with resources. A resource that could be beneficial to Indigenous women is counseling. 4 in 5 Indigenous women have faced violence. 1 in 3 will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. Providing resources such as counseling can help the community with the mental effects of this abuse.
To the Indigenous woman, I'm sorry we have not fought harder for you. For the woman and her baby left for dead by the police in her home while they gave a ride to her attacker back to his house. To the girlfriend punched in her pregnant stomach, to the wife who took the beatings so her kids wouldn't have to. To the daughter who found a man as abusive as her dad, to the co-ed who will never go to the 9 again, to the restraining order as strong as the paper it's made from, and to the shelter with not enough beds. I give 1,000 sweats for rape victims, 1,000 doctorings for husbands, 1,000 prayer ties for courage, 1,000 meetings for silence, 1,000 songs for patience, and 1,000 fires or enough light to fill a room. To reflect off a mirror the size of the moon, just so we can see ourselves for what we are. Complicit. So I dare you to protect them, Mr. President. I dare you to make laws for them, Senator and Representatives. I dare you to try to stop me, tribal leaders. I dare you to go look for me, police officer. For every 1,000 Native women in your district, 330 of them will be sexually assaulted. 88% of the perpetrators will be non-Native, and every piece of every legislation needs a champion, but not all champions are leaders, and not all leaders are men, just like not all kisses are wanted, and not all laws are consensual. They trespass her body like they trespass this land, in the corner of a HUD home, in the back seat of a car, in a courtroom, in every hall of every government. We fail them. The terrorist threat is in the same house, in the same car, goes to the same school, and works at the same job, and the threat 10 times more likely to murder her than anyone else. This war is at home. Living room battlegrounds, bathroom infirmaries, backseat trenches, fists like tanks, sex like a war trophy. Under treaties of silence, she whispered to me, "Please, please stop. I am your wife. I am your sister. I am your mother. I am your daughter. You are supposed to protect me. You are supposed to be a warrior. Protect me from you, from him, from all of them. Tell me you have daughters. Tell me you don't want this for them. Tell me you won't joke about this with your friends. Tell me you won't forget we talk. Tell me you will do something. Do something."
Why be a social worker? Social work matters. Social workers help improve the well-being of others. Being a social worker, you can help make a difference in someone's life. Social workers play a role in social change. Social workers advocate for new laws and regulations to help better lives. There are many job opportunities. There is a high demand for social workers. The overall employment of social workers is projected to grow 7% from 2022 to 2032. Over 63,000 openings for social workers are projected each year. In 2021, there were over 700,000 social work jobs. There are many different fields of social work you can go into. Being a social worker offers you many different jobs. Social workers are found almost everywhere, including schools, hospitals, mental health clinics, senior centers, elected offices, private practices, prisons, military, corporations, and in numerous public and private agencies.